This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
And good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America for this Thursday morning. I'm Seth Merrill. Happy you could take the time to join us. Coming up on today's show, John DeSilva from RacingWithBruno.com. He's a regular Thursday guest. We'll talk a little New York racing for this afternoon. We'll also look out to the stakes race coming up this weekend down at Aqueduct, the Red Smith. Look back at last weekend's Long Island Handicap as well. So a little New York conversation coming up in just a few minutes. And then at 10:30, a little after 10:30, going to be visited by Kevin Modesti from the LA Daily News. Longtime racing writer out there in Southern California. Now he's moved over. He's actually on the editorial page now, but a long time on the racing beat in Southern California. So I reached out to him. He had a couple of videos up on the internet within the past week looking at the inside at Hollywood Park as they are early into the first few days of what is going to be their final meet. And I just wanted to touch base with somebody out in Southern California. He's a long-time watcher of racing out there. Get a feel for what it's like out in Southern California, a little history on Hollywood Park and how the landscape will change now that Hollywood Park is going to be pulled out of the mix at the end of their meet coming up just in a very few weeks. So we'll talk with Kevin Modesti a little after the bottom of the hour. Some news over the past 24 hours or so. Noted it on the Handicappers Report. Javier Castellano involved in a spill at Aqueduct yesterday after his mount crossed the wire at the last race, complained of some chest pain, was taken to the hospital, and Jeff Carl had pulled up a tweet, I believe from Javier's agent, that said probably off mounts today, but likely on tomorrow. So keep your eyes on that situation. If you're playing Aqueduct today, Javier Castellano named on your mounts, double check. But it looks like he'll be taking the day off today and potentially back tomorrow. Also noted, as far as jockey news came out within the past day or so, Calvin Burrell probably not back in the mix until after the start of the year. Will miss the Churchill Downs meet. And it looks like, again, Oaklawn opens up early in January. That's what they're aiming for. I talked about this earlier with Jeff Carl. We talked about it right after Calvin was hurt back at the end of October at Keeneland, took a spill, fractured his fibula, and they were talking then they'd be back in about 3 weeks. And I said, broken bone. Calvin's not a young guy anymore. Wouldn't surprise me if it takes a little more time. And sure enough, going to wait things out and let things heal up and mend nicely. So Calvin Burrell probably on the sidelines until the beginning of the Oaklawn meet, just after sometime shortly after the first of the year, that is. Wanted to touch on, there's some interesting news that came out of Australia within the past couple of days. They are now putting in their own kind of championship series. Of course, we have the Breeders' Cup, the Champion Series in the UK. England was initiated within the past couple of years, I guess. So we've got the Breeders' Cup in the fall. The championship meet in England is essentially a couple of weeks before the Breeders' Cup. Well, in Australia, they will also have a fall championship meet, but fall in Australia is, of course, our springtime. So they're going to have a nice series of races down there in Australia that they hope attracts world-class runners. Those races will be run on Saturday, April 12th, and Easter Saturday, April 19th. They're going to involve a series of races such as the Doncaster, which will become the world's richest 1-mile race for $3 million. The TJ Smith become the world's richest 6-furlong race, $2.5 million. And the Queen Elizabeth Stakes will become the world's richest 1.25-mile turf race, $4 million. And again, they are looking to attract a world-class group of contenders for these races. Some of the names they've thrown out that they will be chasing: Wise Dan for that Doncaster, the mile race. They'll also be chasing Trev, the ARC winner. What's going to be interesting is the placement on the calendar in April. What exactly will they attract from North America? Now they're kind of butting up against competing potentially with some of the Dubai races. Obviously, they may be going for a little bit of a different scenario for some of these horses, but again, they butt up. It's a little bit early in the year for what we're looking for maybe to have our champion type horses totally cranked up. But even more importantly, one of the top trainers in that Australian European region came out and commented in the South China Morning Post within the past day. He thinks there could be trouble brewing for Australia with this scenario because there are quarantine rules in Australia that are really a little bit more restrictive than you see in most of the rest of the racing world. And it hinders foreign runners from making invading attempts at races like this. You just have to spend too much time in the country before and after for a lot of folks to put up for a race like this. So that is going to be interesting to see if they maybe change up their quarantine rules a little bit, or if they keep the quarantine rules, will they be able to get the world-class fields they're looking at? But they're putting some money into this. As one of the racing executives is quoted, if you want to get Tiger Woods, you pay a lot of money. If you want to get David Beckham, you pay a lot of money. We're not just going to sit back. If there's a great horse and we want it here, we'll look at it and do everything possible. They're looking at appearance fees and paying shipping fees and whatnot. So they're spending some money trying to get a series of championship type races in Australia to compete essentially with the Breeders' Cup types of things, the championship races over in England. But again, it's going to be interesting that these will be in April, so a different time of the year than the English championships or our Breeders' Cup. But we'll see how that shakes out again with those quarantine rules that are a little bit restrictive down there and have kept horses, for instance, out of the Cox Plate and the Melbourne Cup. They have had some foreign invaders, and that's been a concern down there, but typically these are horses that have been sold to Australian connections and have moved down, or because of the time of the year, they're willing to go down and sit in those quarantine conditions at the October time of the year for the Melbourne Cup. This early springtime thing could make things a little bit more dicey. Interesting, we had Gene Kirshner on the show yesterday from the Buffalo News. Talked with him a little bit about the Breeders' Cup, got some thoughts also on Eclipse Awards. He thought Princess Asilmar would be his vote for 3-year-old filly Eclipse. Subsequently, Bob Ehalt, who joins us occasionally here, writes for ESPN. He put out a column within the past couple of days noting that his vote for 3-year-old filly Eclipse would be Princess Asilmar. He thinks that because her connection stepped up to the plate, that's a little bit of a bonus. He's kind of looking at the records, thinking comparable, Princess Asilmar very good, but the sporting gesture from the connections, stepping up, taking on the challenge on the home court of Beholder adds a little extra to the equation. And so Bob Ehalt saying his Eclipse vote will go for Princess Asilmar. So within the past couple of days, that's a couple who have said that. I still think Beholder is going to be the winner there. I would predict runaway winner, but as I say, we've had a couple of guests over the past couple of days who are tilting towards Princess Asilmar. So maybe that vote will be a little closer than we think. We'll see. Jay Hubday, meanwhile, says that essentially the voting is done, as Jay says. He thinks the Eclipse Awards are kind of settled. He thinks the toughest decision is the 2-year-old filly Eclipse. But other than that, he feels essentially the Breeders' Cup has sealed up things. And it's interesting, Jay Hubday in his column says the last time a race run after the Breeders' Cup decided a championship was in 2004 when Del Mar Futurity winner Declan's Moon skipped the Breeders' Cup and then beat Breeders' Cup juvenile winner Wilco in the Cash Call Futurity. So he says it's been the better part of 10 years since we've had a race after the Breeders' Cup make a decision for an Eclipse Award. I would have to go and look. I would think there was a couple that maybe you could have made the case that the Breeders' Cup things were kind of settled, but I think the nail went in with races after the Breeders' Cup in some of these divisions. But I've said it many times before, I wish the voters wouldn't have their minds locked up after the Breeders' Cup because there's still a couple of months of pretty good racing. And this year, races like the Clark and, of course, the Cigar Mile, potentially the Cash Call Futurity could wind up making some decisions for people. I do think a lot of people do lock in after the Breeders' Cup, though, and give too much weight, in my opinion, to those Breeders' Cup races. All right, I mentioned it a little earlier on the Handicappers Report. I wanted to pick up the stretch drive from a race yesterday because I think this is a 2-year-old filly that we're going to keep our eyes on, certainly as far as turf goes. This is a state-bred 2-year-old filly on the grass from yesterday at Aqueduct. When I handicapped on the handicappers report, I picked Christophe Clement firster on top, Summer Solo, noting that this one had a sibling called Adirondack Summer that was a debut winner, another sibling, Summer Breeze, that was a debut winner. The number 4, now watch on the outside, you can see that Yellow Silks just turns on the afterburners, and with kind of the greatest of ease in that last eighth of a mile, just goes by them in a very nice performance. Now, subsequently, the NYRA broadcast, they came back for the next race, and Andy Serling and Jason Blewett were commenting on this race and talking about how impressive the performance of Summer Solo was. I agree. Andy Serling made the great comment, though, what was behind the horse in that race? And that's what you always have to wonder. When a racehorse looks that impressive, what were they beating? We'll find out more about this one next time. But a first-time starter, some nice breeding, goes out, gets it done for Christophe Clement, Joel Rosario, adds another talented New York bred to the picture potentially. 7-2 on the morning line. I was hoping we'd get that, wound up going just under 5-2, paid $6.80. So decent price for a horse that seemed to be live first time out of the box. But as I say, it's going to be interesting to see. Keep Summer Solo in mind. Let's see in the second career start if she can validate that career debut. All right, we are going to take a look now at a little historical note, because as I say, coming up later on the show, we're going to be joined by Kevin Modesti to talk some Hollywood Park. And in putting together notes and whatnot, I went back to the first Breeders' Cup at Hollywood Park and just took a look at the Breeders' Cup Classic there, which had been talked about a lot in the past few weeks anyway, leading into this year's Breeders' Cup. The first Breeders' Cup at Hollywood Park, very exciting, probably set the tone and provided a great foundation for the Breeders' Cup to grow from. And I called for the stretch drive of this race in the Kevin Modesti segment, but then I thought, you know what, as we go into the first commercial break, this is really a classic race. And it is the first Breeders' Cup Classic, 1984. It was at Hollywood Park on the way out. So I thought we'd take the chance here to watch the 1984 Breeders' Cup Classic, watch them come down the stretch, an absolute ding-dong battle. As I say, this really set the tone for the Breeders' Cup, a great way to kick off that Breeders' Cup concept. Coming down the stretch, it will be the favorite, Slew of Gold, Preakness winner Gate Dancer with that funky hood that Gate Dancer always wore to cover up the ears, and 31-1 long shot Wild Again, Pat Day in the saddle. They will be ding-donging it down the stretch, those three, Slew of Gold, Gate Dancer, Wild Again. Wild Again eventually winds up to be the winner. Of course, there was a 10-minute wait while the steward's inquiry decided which way to go, but it was Wild Again eventually being posted as the winner and first under the line. So as we go to the first break, we will watch the 1984 Breeders' Cup Classic. When we come out of the break, John DeSilva.
About his head. They're in the gate, and they're off. In the Breeders' Cup Classic in Muggatee, he's put right to the whip from the gate. Up to take the lead. He's bearing out now as they pass the stands the first time. Here's Precisionist to join him, and in between horses, it's Wild Again. 2 lengths back to Desert Wine. He's settled in the 4th. And the big horse, Slew of Gold, is off the rail, and he's racing 5th by 4 lengths. Track Baron is now racing in 6th. Canadian Factor toward the inside. Gate Dancer is the trailer. He's about 12 lengths off the lead. We've got a 3-ply battle for the lead around the turn. And Wild Again emerges with the lead. Precisionist on the outside. Muggatee toward the rail. The first quarter, a snappy 22 3/5 seconds. They enter the backstretch. Wild Again battles it out and takes the lead now by 3/4 of a length to half, and 45 3. Precisionist pressures the pacemaker from the outside. Toward the inside, it's Muggatee now. He's dropped back 3rd, a gap of 4 lengths to Desert Wine racing in 4th. Slew of Gold is still 5th. He's settled into 5th place now, and he's beginning to move up on the outside, a gap of 4 to Track Baron. Gate Dancer is second to last with a half a mile to run, and Canadian Factor is far behind as the field heads for the far turn. 3/4 in 1:10 3, and Slew of Gold now. He's charging on the outside up to engage the leader, Wild Again. It's Wild Again with the lead. Slew of Gold. Cordero aboard at Tex now with 3 furlongs to go. Those two are matching stride for stride. Here comes Track Baron. He's putting in his run. And Gate Dancer, he's in full stride now. And he swings wide for the final quarter mile. On the inside, Wild Again is game, and he's holding on to the lead by a head. Slew of Gold is right at his neck. Here comes Gate Dancer on the outside there in the final furlong. Wild again, desperately holding on to the lead. Slew of Gold is right there in between horses. Gate Dancer on the outside. What a finish. Wild again, Gate Dancer, Slew of Gold in between them. Those three in a dramatic finish. And here's the wire. Wild again does it. I believe it was Wild again, an upset winner. Gate Dancer was right there. Really was a bit too close to call. But the big horse, Slew of Gold, was defeated today. He was third.
This is Steve Beck. Join me Tuesday through Saturday here on OTB TV for At the Races, my Sirius XM daily news magazine of the thoroughbred industry. Handicapping, interviews, analysis, everything you could want. 6 a.m. OTB TV.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. With a newly designed and engineered internet wagering platform, enhanced video streaming, additional funding options, and 3 new individual wagering opportunities, CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. Combine that with our all-new mobile website. You have 2 of the most powerful, innovative, and advanced wagering platforms available today. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Hey, race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook and get in the game. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, fantastic food and drinks, an amazing Vegas-style atmosphere with seating for nearly 900 of your closest friends. Conveniently located at 711 Central Avenue, right off Exit 5 of I-90 in Albany, the Clubhouse Racebook is the better choice.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
Welcome back to Racing Across America for this Thursday morning. Happy to be joined now by John DeSilva of RacingWithBruno.com. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How's everything?
Very good. Happy to have you on board as usual. And for folks who are playing New York this afternoon, what's your weather look like?
The weather is sunny. It's not as cold as it was earlier this week. It should be in the low 50s, no threat of bad weather. The only bad thing is we're not having Javier Castellano riding today.
And that has been confirmed? He's off for today?
That is confirmed. He's not riding. I actually have some of the changes for him. Rajiv Marat picks up his mount in the first race. Jose Lescano picks up his mount in the 4th race. His mount in the 7th race draws in from the also eligible list. So Luis Saez picks up that mount. And his mounts in races 5 and 9 are scratch.
Oh, okay, very good. And is the word he will be back tomorrow?
He will be back tomorrow.
Okay.
He's just a little sore and needs a day to recover. But then again, when it comes to agents, you never know what to believe anyway. But we're going to trust him in this case.
That's right. We'll see. We'll keep it open for tomorrow, but the possibility exists. All right, very good. And did you were there flurries down there? There was a report there was some snow within the past couple of days down in the New York area.
We did have flurries on Thursday, but that went away quickly. Yeah, we did have our first snow, so prepare, folks. This could be an ugly one.
Yeah, and I was watching Finger Lakes on Tuesday, I think it was, and about the middle of the card, Tony Kalo could no longer see the backstretch. It was snowing so hard. Now, unfortunately, it's that time of year, but
we've had everything so far. We've had rain, we've had snow, we've had the invasion of the pigeons. I mean, we've had it all so far, that in the first couple of weeks, and it's not going to get better.
Yeah, Jerry Bossert wrote again yesterday in his column that the pigeons have taken up home in the press box ceiling.
Yeah, and, you can hear them, they're hanging out, they're staying on, having a good old time, and unfortunately, we know they're there from the noises and their droppings, and he's not too happy, and it's unfortunate because you have to wonder who's supposed to be taking care of it. Is it Naira? Is it Genting who's supposed to be taking care of the building? It's not a good situation, and maybe this is what we need to finally get some things straightened out here, because in all honesty, it's a mess right now. Between the parking, I mean, when you had the Port Authority trying to extort money from Naira to use that land, on the day like Cigar Mile Day, it's not going to be pretty, folks.
That's a good point. Also in the Bossert column yesterday, he said folks who arrived, I think sometime on the weekend, were told that the parking lot was full, go over to the casino side. How can that be? How can the Aqueduct parking lot be full?
What happened was the land that they used last year is owned by the Port Authority. And this year, the Port Authority wanted $90,000 from NYRA for use of that land. And when NYRA didn't pay it, they just took it back and they're not allowed to use it. So there's less parking this year than there was last year. And if you go on the other side, that's all casino parking.
Well, that's not a good situation. If you can't park your people, that is definitely a problem. But so we'll keep our eyes on that.
Well, look at what happened. I mean, they take away the tote board. They're claiming that it's moving over everything to where all the fans are. But in reality, it's Genting who doesn't want people walking outside from the casino to look at horse races, to look at the tote board, to look at the races being run on the giant jumbotron. So that's not being built up. They took away the lake. They took away bushes. I mean, basically everything on the left side of the racetrack on the track is barren.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier this week about that situation a little bit, and how potentially the casino end of things don't want the crossover, and that's definitely not a good situation. And it's not something that when the racing industry was pushing for slot machines, I imagine they foresaw. I think they were hoping there would be some crossover. Not to mention the percentage of the slots money, but you hope that the casino side of things at least allows the folks a little bit of insight into the horse racing game, and you hope there's some crossover in that direction, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
No crossover. I'm not holding my breath for crossover. I mean, they just want people to go in, play the slot machines, do whatever. Remember, they are the ones who run the food concession. And when they charge outlandish money so people can walk through the casino to the food court for cheaper food, you know what the goal is.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's unfortunate. But let's shift our attention to the racing side of things. Before we get some thoughts for today, I wanted to go back to last weekend. The column in the Racing Forum, I think, had it written correctly. We're going to look at the stretch run of the Long Island Handicap here. We're going to watch the number one, Inimitable Romane, get it done as the rank outsider, 28-1. But I believe it was a Dave Litvin column. It says, guilty of theft in the Long Island Handicap. And they weren't kidding. These fractions, 26, 53, 120 for 6 furlongs. How are they ever going to catch? These are the kind that drive me crazy, because the jockeys sitting behind that pace, how are you going to run down the horse in the stretch? And you and I talked about this race at this time last week, and we were hoping Anjaz might provide a little bit of the pace scratched. And so the pace winds up to be Inimitable Romane all the way. And as I say, theft is the perfect expression.
I mean, if you look at the past performance of this race, you had to be on or close to the pace. The only time the horse came from far back is when the speed collapsed because the horse wasn't good enough. So you had to know what you had to do to win this race. And I'm just shocked that these jockeys don't do their research and see that you had to be on or close to the pace. And to let the pace go that slow, it was just unbelievable. I mean, I just sat there wondering, what is wrong with these guys? I know Andy talks about time and time again why these guys let somebody get away on the front end with murder, and it happens time and time again. And you really have to wonder, what's happened to jockeys? Because years ago, this would have never happened. But unfortunately, the quality of jockey we have today, more often than not, makes this mistake because they don't know what a clock in their head is.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when you sit there and you watch, and your horse is sitting 4th or 5th, far behind a pace like that, and you know you're never going to get a run. It's absolutely frustrating, and it was perfectly illustrated in that Long Island. All right, let's take a look at some racing today. What do you have for us?
Well, we're going to go to races 6, 7, and 8.
All right, let's kick right over to race number 6, and race number 6 today is, if I can get my pay, yeah, here we go. Optional claiming event, 25 tags. Non-winners are one other than the condition. They're going to go that 1-turn mile. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go with number 4, Tiz Teresa. Now, this is a horse who's going turf to dirt, first time Eddie Keneally. Now, let me give you a couple of stats. On the NYRA circuit, Eddie Keneally is 16% winning, but 67% in the money. And then when he's going dirt to dirt, on a national basis, he's 30% winning and 60% in the money. So here's Tiz Teresa, doing that type of move, stretching out to a mile, trying a route for the first time, but being by Tiz now with St. Bartholomew. Bred to handle distance, not a problem. And 8-1, I'll definitely take my shot at this one.
I like it, absolutely. Tiz Teresa in the 6th. And John, before we go on, I showed at the top of the show, did you see the summer solo race yesterday, the Christophe Clement Firster?
I did play that horse. The horse was tremendous. I mean, my God, this horse has a nice future. I'll be very curious to see what Christophe does with this horse down in Florida, which I expect to be the next start since grass racing should be ending soon.
Yeah, a nice New York bred, another New York bred on the scene with some talent. And I said when I showed the race, the next race will be very interesting because, as Serling said after the race was over, it was an impressive performance. But when you see a performance that impressive, you're not really sure what was behind the winner necessarily. I think this horse, because of the breeding and the siblings that have come before, I think this horse is legitimately talented. But I'll be interested to see the next race, which probably you're right, will be down in Florida.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the book. I mean, I was just talking to someone yesterday. We have no 2-year-old stakes on the grass, and the way now has been, they'll try to push turf racing into December, but now with PJ gone and the man who didn't see a turf race he didn't like, you just have to wonder if the new racing secretary will try to cut back, maybe end turf racing earlier and try to emphasize more on dirt racing.
Yeah, Panza's arrival is going to be very interesting indeed. All right, 7th race at Aqueduct this afternoon. B-level claimer, 25 to 30 tags. They're scheduled on the turf at a mile.
I'm going with number 10, Mr. Rosenthal. This is a horse who hasn't started since September. He's dropping down to a claiming tag 30,000. If you look at the past performances, it was 3 years to the day that Mr. Rosenthal wired the field at Aqueduct going to March 16th against State Bred. This is on November 17th of last year. He did it 35 to 1. And if you look at the post position number 10, which basically he's going to be right there. I mean, we know there's a scratch in the race, so he's moving one inside post position number 9, but we know he could wire the field from the outside on the Aqueduct turf course.
And I like those kind of year-to-year situations. And the prior race last year was not a good effort. The race this year at Belmont was pretty good. So he's coming in and maybe even a little better form. Let's see if he tries the theft today at 5 to 1 on the morning line. Finally, race number 8, optional claimer, 25,000 tags, non-winners of one other than the condition. They're, again, going to go the one-turn mile.
I'm going to the rail with number 1, Go Canes Go. The David Camizzo trainee just missed finishing second last time when he was a first-time gelding and returning to the dirt. Drew the rail that day, drew the rail today at Caprado. He changed him out, not going to Florida yet to make sure he rides this horse. And I think this is a horse that's going to try to control in the front end. And second race off the layoff, I think Go Canes Go could hold on today.
Yeah, coming off the nice front-end win last time, Edgar Prado. And there was a nice article in the Racing Forum indicating Prado and Pletcher may be teaming up a little more this winter down in Florida. That'll be interesting.
Well, I've always suspected a little alliance between Prado and Pletcher through Musicar and Placeris when you saw that he started riding a lot more Pletcher horses last year down in Florida. So it's not surprising this is happening now, especially with Johnny Velasquez out, who's going to be the go-to jockey for Todd Pletcher. And I'm sure he'll use a lot of Castellano still, but he still needs the second jock, and Prado, I think, will be it.
And speaking of John Velasquez, has there been any buzz in the press box there? Have you heard any updates? I haven't heard anything in maybe a week and a half.
He supposedly came home this week. He's going to take time. And basically, this is the type of injury. You just have to heal.
Yeah.
You can't push it. And I think what Johnny's going to do is he's going to spend time with his family, heal up, not push it too much. And I'm thinking maybe first of the year he might be back. If he has something maybe for Santa Anita, on opening day, he might try for that, but I'm suspecting more first of the year for him.
Yeah, and this is probably a good time of the year for it to happen after the Breeders' Cup is kind of a lull for some of these New York jockeys, anyway, some of the bigger names. They'll take a little time off anyway before Florida starts, so maybe it works out well for him, and you want him to come back 100%, so we wish him well. Before we let you go, John, let's take a look out at Saturday down at Aqueduct, the Red Smith Grade 3 event. for a $250,000. They're going 1 mile and 3/8 on the turf. This looks like a fun race. Absolutely a full field. You have Tannery in here coming in off the E.P. Taylor win, the filly against the boys. You have Hyper, who ran second in the Canadian International up at Woodbine, behind the very talented Joshua Tree, who won that race 3 times. Hyper going out, of course, for Ken Ramsey and Chad Brown. I think this race is very interesting. And the video I brought up to take a look at is the bowl game back on October 17th. We're going to watch the number 10, Imagining, get it done for John Velasquez and Shug McGahee. And I pulled this up because that day in the bowl game, Imagining did it on the front end. Could we have another theft job in the Red Smith this weekend?
I don't know about why, because you have a couple other horses with speed in the race who could do something. And look at Chad Paul. He's pulling out the ultimate speed jockey in Chucky Lopez and Mission Approved. Would that a horse win? No. But we definitely affect the pace. So I think it's just going to be a horse coming from off the pace. And the Hyper, coming off that second in Canadian International, is the one to beat. I'll be very curious to see what Goldberg does here with Tannery. I mean, the horse did win the E.P. Taylor. You know, that was on the yielding turf course, though. I'm going to take my chances. Now, I'm going to go with Hyper, but a horse we may need to look out for, who might surprise, could be Arctic North. And this is a horse who's owned by Ledden Friedman, as you know from the sheet. You know, trained by Pete Miller, coming in from California, also owned by the Wachtell stable. Horse is trying the stakes for the first time and stretching out. But when I see Friedman and Wachtell, they know what they're doing. You're not going to ship a horse out to California just to get frequent flyer miles at this time of year. This horse at a price, I may use a little bit just in case.
Yeah, that's a good point. He is a horse that, you know, only 4 starts, so he's one of those horses where there's some question marks, but as you say, the question marks start to become even more intriguing coming all the way from California for this race. So Arctic North is a little bit interesting in there. Another one that I found interesting since the 3-year-old season, How Great looks to me like a horse that could be a little bit of a contender at maybe potentially a little bit of value, although I have no argument with your selection there. I think Hyper is going to be very dangerous. How can you leave anything from Ken Ramsey out of the mix this year? John, we appreciate the visit this morning. As always, good luck this afternoon and on the weekend as well. We'll talk to you next week.
Good luck, take care, and hopefully things will be much better at Aqueduct.
All right, thanks a lot. John DeSilva from RacingWithBruno.com. We'll take our next break. When we come back, Kevin Modesti from the LA Daily News, just going to talk a little Hollywood Park as they are now in the midst of what is their final meet there. All of that right after this.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night school in the buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network. The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right, the 2013 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2014 National Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month, the Capital Cup on December 7th. So sign up today online at capitalotb.com or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook. And don't forget our Showviver series, Capital OTB's online handicapping contest. Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Thursday morning. As noted before the commercial break, happy to be joined now by Kevin Modesti from the LA Daily News. If you're not familiar with Kevin, when I started to put the EquiDaily site together, 11 years ago now, in the early days, I linked to plenty of Kevin's work as he was covering the racing beat out there in Southern California, the Los Angeles area for the LA newspapers, various newspapers. Now has moved over doing editorial work for the LA Daily News, but he's a guy who still follows racing very closely. So with Hollywood Park in the midst of their last meet, I thought nobody better to talk to as we do wrap things up for an important track, not only in Southern California, nationally as well. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Seth. It's good to talk with you.
Happy to have you on board. And before we get into the Hollywood Park, we're wrapping up just a couple of weeks now out from the Breeders' Cup. For the last 2 weeks, been asking guests, what are your post-Breeders' Cup thoughts? What were some of the highlights for you for those 2 days of racing?
I thought it was a really good Breeders' Cup. Not without its blemishes. The juvenile fillies obviously had a lot go wrong, but it was the international event that it's supposed to be, with a lot of European winners. And I thought the one thing that really stood out was the number of returning champions and returning winners. Really more than we've had before. And we've wrung our hands for so many years and decades that good horses don't stay around and become fan favorites. Well, at least for a couple of years, we've had some stars, real champions coming back and running again and running well again at the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, and two of them, for me at least, kind of Groupie Doll overcame what looked like a lackluster season as compared to last year, but she steps it up in the Breeders' Cup. And then Misdirection, I could not pull the trigger on her the second year in a row off a very long layup, but the Jim Rome horse gets it done again. So a couple of good stories there. And as you note, Wise Dan also comes back to repeat. And then Kathy Ritvo, Mucho Macho Man, Gary Stevens, and Mike Smith. There was a lot of good stories during the weekend.
A lot of good stories. Well, a lot of horses that people would have heard of, even if they pay attention to racing out here, only when the Breeders' Cup's here.
All right, Kevin, let's shift our attention over to the other track out there in the LA area, Hollywood Park. As noted, they're in the midst of their final meet. The Reaper has been at the door for a while now. The company that also owned Bay Meadows up in Northern California. They raised that just in time for the economy to go south, and I guess rubble sat there for quite a while. Thankfully, Hollywood Park was saved that fate, and they decided while the economy is down, they will continue racing. Well, that is now ending, and they will develop the property. But for folks who haven't been able to get out there and visit Southern California and see Hollywood Park, just give us a little idea what the area is like and what the physical plant is like out at Hollywood Park.
Well, first of all, people are resigned to the end of this when Churchill Downs sold the track to a company with interest in both racing and land development. The track was essentially given 3 years, and that was 8 years ago. So it's been on borrowed time, and it benefited in a sense from the economic downturn. It wasn't worth developing real estate during the last few years, but now it is. People who are fans of Hollywood Park, and I consider myself a fan of it, have always said it's a beautiful track, maybe not in the classic sense that Santa Anita is beautiful. Santa Anita has the gardens and really old-fashioned architecture in those mountains that no man could design, no architect could design. It's just such a beautiful setting. Hollywood Park is the noted track of lakes and flowers. It's a beautiful scene when you look out from the grandstand. The physical plant isn't as gorgeous. Of course, it was set back by the fact that it had a fire. It was virtually destroyed in the 1940s and was built again. So, by definition, isn't as historic a physical plant. It's been, I guess, aqueducts to Santa Anita's Belmont, or Calder to Santa Anita's Gulfstream. It's been the other track. It's been known. It's been said to be on the wrong side of town. That's, I think, been a bit of an excuse for its struggles over the years. Nobody said that the LA Forum, which is right next door, was on the wrong side of town when the Lakers and the LA Kings were playing there. People didn't seem to have trouble going to Inglewood then. The fact is, it's on the other side of town from where most of the great horsemen live. They live on the Santa Anita side of town. So people in LA, where Freeway inconvenience is everything, have long dreaded the drive across town. It's been the less fashionable track. I would say it's benefited from a lack of pretense. Santa Anita sells you history and grandeur, and some sense of class. And Hollywood Park has really been a gambler's track. That's been its great claim to fame. Not only has it played a huge role in the history of racing, just because of the great horses and horsemen and jockeys who have competed there, but it's played a huge role in shaping racing as we know it in the present day. It's been one of the most innovative of racetracks. That's where the Pick Six was born in the U.S. It had the first Pick Four, the first Pick Five. It of course had the first Breeders' Cup, which has defined big-time racing in the U.S. for 30 years now. So maybe there's some sad poetry in the fact that it now becomes arguably the biggest American racetrack to go under. It's always been on the cutting edge of good and bad.
Yeah, you make a great point. That was something I wasn't even thinking about this morning, but the innovations they've made into the game with those various bets, and that certainly is in the history of American racing absolutely notable. Kevin, I want to bring up, you posted a couple of videos on the internet that have taken place since the beginning of the meet. First one, just have a few seconds from the video you shot looking at the betting windows and the concession stands, which are obviously going to be a little bit empty. Tell us how Hollywood Park has changed since you first started visiting there as far as the attendance in that way, and is Hollywood Park any different than many other tracks in America in that way?
Well, that's right. I mean, a lot of what has brought about Hollywood Park's decline and demise is what other racetracks are going through, hopefully not to the same end. I first went to Hollywood Park in the 70s, and I think the first time I went was probably for harness racing. That was before they expanded the track from the mile to a mile and an eighth, and harness racing became impractical after that. And I started covering racing in the early 90s, just as R.G. Hubbard was taking over from Marge Everett as owner, and he made a lot of physical changes to the plant. Moved the saddling paddock and beautified it. I'm having trouble remembering all of the changes because they've been internalized by now, But maybe that's another thing for the list of reasons that Hollywood Park hasn't gotten the respect of Santa Anita. Santa Anita's essentially been the same for decades and decades. Hollywood Park has changed a lot over the years, and always with an eye to improvement and better service. But that's in the eye of the beholder. When I first started covering racing, it was, of course, just before full card simulcasting, and I guess crosstown wagering was in, but it hadn't fully taken hold. So, you'd still get 10,000 people on a weekday. Now you don't get 10,000 people on Hollywood Gold Cup Day, as sad as that sounds. And so there's a lot of rattling around, and that little video that I posted was, of course, showing maybe the worst scene you can find, which is a full section of the main line of the grandstand that's completely empty, unstaffed, mutual windows, a completely empty food stand. You go over one section and there are people. But, this is essentially the main floor opposite the furlong pole, right? So mid-stretch, and there's nobody there. I wanted, as I go, probably each weekend now before the closing, to continue to pay my respects. I want to keep taking these little videotapes, mainly for my own memory, right? But also to try to chronicle the end. Hollywood Park really deserves more respect than it has gotten. The I may go off on a on a tangent here. I don't think I'll ever forget that when Churchill Downs sold the track to, let's face it, land developers. They made the announcement the week of the Hollywood Gold Cup in 2005. It must have been on the day of the Hollywood Gold Cup draw. I mean, could they have chosen a worse time to sort of twist the knife? So I'd like to see Hollywood Park get more respect, if only for its place in history, and again for its innovative spirit over the years.
Yeah, and you make a great point, and people shouldn't forget that. For a while, Churchill Downs, that was part of their racing network, and they kind of abandoned Hollywood Park, which to me is a black mark on their resume. But you talk a little bit about, we saw the video, and there was an empty section. I think that's symptomatic of a lot of racetracks. There's still a lot of fans out there and a lot of money being bet, but it's being done in people's living rooms, unfortunately. And so nice tracks like this don't get the crowds they used to get, which then leads to the company that owns them feeling that they have to move towards development like that. But right after that video, we also tagged on, you had the video in the press box. I think this is symptomatic also. You had a press box, and I think I counted about 4 people in there.
Yeah, I waited until there were at least 2 people in there. I could have shot that at a time when there was nobody sitting down working or walking around. And remember, this was Sunday. This was the day that Shared Belief ran that really impressive race in the Hollywood preview. It might turn out that this horse will be a Kentucky Derby contender. And when we look back, there will be about 2 journalists who could say that they were there, right? That is the way of it now. My newspaper group is the one in this area that continues to print full charts and have a full handicap and census box. I don't know how many papers anywhere in the country do that anymore, but the dominant paper here, the Los Angeles Times, is down to 1, 2, 3 results and running entries, but not a handicap. That's a comment not only on racing, but on newspapers and our lack of staffing too. But when you look for reasons that racing has fallen out of the public consciousness, the fact that there aren't people in the press box at Hollywood Park on a Sunday, that would be one of the reasons.
And again, I think that's symptomatic of the game too, and that ties in. It brought up to my mind as we talked about that a subject that my partner here on Sunday morning, Steve Bick, who hosts the Sirius XM radio show during the week, we've talked about this. How, after the Breeders' Cup, is Gary Stevens in this remarkable comeback, and he wins the Distaff and the Breeders' Cup Classic? How is this not a mainstream story after that retirement and then the comeback? This is an incredible story that just is not getting mainstream media coverage. My thought when we had that conversation, Steve and I said, you know what? And you may have some insight into this. I think if you went back 20 years, certainly 30 or 40 years, I think if you went into the sports room at a newspaper, most everybody had experience at the racetrack and liked to go to the races and play the races. I think over the last 20 years, that's become less and less and less in newsrooms. And so the folks that are writing the news now are just not plugged into the racing game.
That's true. And, the sad thing is that the people who continue to read newspapers are of a generation that is racing conscious. They know who Bill Shoemaker was, right? The sports editors at my newspaper, bless them, they keep racing in the paper as much as they can. Let's face it, full result charts and a handicap and a consensus box take up a lot of space. But they know when they leave something out, or they have the wrong horse's name, or they run the wrong charts, they're going to get 200 phone calls from readers and veteran readers, right? So, really, if newspapers want to hang on to surefire customers, they should be still covering racing. It may not be as many people as it used to be, but they are loyal customers. Racing is an information-driven sport for those of us who participate in it as bettors, and newspapers should
Yeah, that was certainly the head scratcher out here on the East Coast when the day before the Belmont Stakes, the New York Post dropped their racing coverage, and we all
my
said,
goodness.
yeah, we all said exactly the same thing. There is still a good customer base out there for this type of thing, particularly down in the New York City area. Kevin, we only got a couple of minutes left, but I just want your thoughts as a longtime viewer of the racing scene in Southern California. Hollywood Park, only a few weeks left. It's going to disappear, unfortunately, from the consciousness, except for some of those where are they now kind of stories now, or that will come up in subsequent years. But give us your thoughts on the Southern California racing scene and how they're going to go forward in the absence of Hollywood Park.
You know, they have a schedule for next year, which has a long Santa Anita winter, spring, on into early summer season now. And I don't know how many people are looking forward to being in Arcadia for 6 months and being in the San Gabriel Valley, which gets pretty hot, you know, in mid-June. It'll be essentially the same schedule with elongated Santa Anita, and then the addition of short seasons at Los Alamitos, which is the Orange County track that's best known for quarter horse racing. But they'll have 2 weeks in July between Santa Anita and Del Mar, and then I guess 3 weeks in December. After that, what still sounds to me like a weird idea, the Del Mar winter season. So it'll go, you know, Santa Anita fall, what we think of as Oak Creek still, to Del Mar, to Los Alamitos, and then to the traditional day after Christmas opening of Santa Anita. You know, that addition of Los Alamitos spices it up a little bit, although the racing, I'm sure, won't be as classy as we're used to. But it'll be at least interesting to see what they put on a 5/8 mile track. It's you know, ask me in June.
All right.
When they're at Santa Anita.
We will. We absolutely will. And the Del Mar end of the year meet is going to be interesting because we're right up here. We're located just about 30 miles below Saratoga. And Saratoga in the summertime, the mutuals people and the barn help and whatnot, they move into town and people move out of their homes and they rent space for that 6 weeks. I'm sure it's similar.
Del Mar too.
Yeah, I'm sure it's similar in Del Mar. So where are these people going to live? You know, at the end, I think logistically that is going to be very, very interesting to see how they work that out. And Kevin, just got about 30 seconds, but before we go, am I correct that the entire Hollywood facility isn't going to move? They're going to keep, what, the card room / casino?
That's true, which is really a separate facility. There will continue to be simulcast facilities there. And then we'll see, of course, what this, housing development becomes. Will consist of, and whether there will be some remnant of Hollywood Park. Let's hope. I mean, they have lakes and flowers there in the infield. Let's hope they hold on to some of that as a recreational area or a park. It would be nice to have something to visit for those of us who have fond memories of Hollywood Park.
Yeah, at least if they've got housing there, they should be located on Wild Again Lane, something like that. There you go.
Well, Lafitte King High, I don't know if it's Avenue or Court or whatever, is the street that runs between Hollywood Park and the Forum. So let's hope that. I think there's a Kelso Street or something somewhere near. Hope they keep those names and remember why they're there.
Yeah, you're right, though. One of the bigger tracks in my lifetime to go out of business, and so you do hope that they keep at least some memory of the track there that we can all fondly remember in years ahead. But, Kevin, we certainly appreciate the visit this morning. As we are in the midst of the final meet at Hollywood Park, I just wanted to talk a little bit about it, reminisce, and what it has meant over the years historically to Southern California racing and racing nationally before things wrap up out there. Again, we appreciate the visit. Kevin Modesti from the Los Angeles Daily News, thanks for the visit.
Thank you, Seth. Look forward to talking with you again.
All right. We'll wrap things up for Racing Across America for this Thursday morning. Kevin Modesti from the Los Angeles Daily News. Earlier, John DeSilva from RacingWithBruno.com. That's going to bring us to the end of the show. We're here every Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. with Racing Across America. 9 a.m. every day is the Handicappers Report, where we try to hand out some good ideas. Hopefully, we did that this morning. So good luck at the races this afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.